Everyone stopped what they were doing. Everyone had the same expression on their face, the same thought. How could a woman with so much success, fame, money, and beauty kill herself? Nobody could believe it, because everyone wanted what Marilyn had. People simply couldn't accept the truth that life wasn't that important to this woman. Marlon Brando spoke about Marilyn Monroe's death like this: Marilyn wasn't who she appeared to be. Beneath that cheerful face lay a fragile, wounded, and traumatic soul. When she ended her own life at 36, this death naturally gave rise to certain theories. Was Marilyn killed because of her connection to John F. Kennedy? Was her death a murder? No, Marilyn intentionally took her own life. People couldn't digest this reality, so they took refuge in theories like she was murdered, because they thought Marilyn was nothing more than the person they saw on screen. However, when we look at her past and mental world, we can put the pieces of this death into place. Marilyn Monroe was born in Los Angeles on June 1st, 1926. Her father was nowhere to be found. He was missing. Her mother Gladys was a severe mental patient. In fact, the mental illness had reached such serious levels that Gladys spent more time in mental hospitals than at home. 2 weeks after Marilyn was born, she thought she couldn't care for her daughter in this condition, and gave her to a foster family. Marilyn never knew what a family was from the moment she was born. Throughout her childhood, she went through exactly 12 foster families and stayed in an orphanage for a while. In one of these foster families, she experienced a trauma she would never overcome. A neighbor of the foster family locked Marilyn in a room and subjected her to physical abuse. I thought the people I lived with were my real family. I used to call them Daddy and Mommy. The woman finally couldn't take it anymore and told me this: "Don't call me Mommy anymore. You're old enough to understand this now. I'm not even your relative. You're just staying here with us. Your mother will come tomorrow. You can call her Mommy if you want." And when I said, "Hello, Mommy," to my real mother, she just looked at me. She never kissed me, never held my hand, and didn't even talk to me. But her bigger problem was her father. Marilyn had learned, though with difficulty, who her real mother was. But her father was still a fantasy for her. So how did Marilyn fill that void of uncertainty about her father? By daydreaming as if her father was with her. One time I had a daydream that lasted a whole week. In my dream, my father would come to the hospital to visit me. All the patients looked at me with jealousy. My father kissed my forehead and said, "You'll get better in a few days, my girl. You're not crying like the other girls. I'm proud of you." Marilyn's childhood passed by creating fantasies. She was quiet, calm, even shy, we could say. She had no friends. Nobody invited her to their home to play. She hated school. But on her way home from school, a bond had formed between her and a street dog that greeted her. One day, when this street dog made too much noise, a neighbor chased the dog with a hoe in his hand. And when he finally caught it, he split the dog in two with the blow of the hoe. Marilyn witnessed this event with her own eyes. She hated the orphanage. She also hated school. And for a girl back then, there was only one way to escape both the orphanage and school: marriage. And as soon as Marilyn turned 16, she married a 21-year-old worker named James, who was her neighbor. In this marriage, in Marilyn's own words, she was about to die of boredom. The couple had nothing in common. They couldn't even have a proper conversation. What really broke their relationship was Marilyn's career choice. Marilyn was also working as a factory worker like her husband during this time. One day, a photographer came to the factory, And while taking photos of the workers, he wanted to take more photos of this young girl. Marilyn posed for product shoots for this photographer. After the compliments she received from the photographer, she gained some self-confidence. Also, being in front of the camera pleased her. She slowly started entering the modeling industry. Having eyes looking at her was her dream, even as a child. However, right at this moment, her husband James would intervene. James wasn't pleased with his wife doing modeling work. Marilyn, on the other hand, was determined to realize her dream of acting. When she was 21, she decided to divorce James. She wanted to transition from modeling to acting. First, she started taking small roles in films. If she wanted to reach leading role level, she had to make radical changes in herself. She didn't quite like her appearance and had shortcomings in her acting ability. She had plastic surgery. She took lessons from the best acting coaches, read books, improved her diction. She dedicated her 20s to developing herself in her profession. And by the time she reached 28, she was at the peak of her career. Now she had proven herself. She started a romance with a superstar baseball player named Joe DiMaggio. Shortly after, the couple decided to get married, but Marilyn experienced with Joe a similar problem to what she had with her first husband, James. Joe wasn't happy with Marilyn's extremely busy acting career. He couldn't stand constantly seeing his wife as an object of desire for other men on screen, and would have fits of jealousy. In fact, when the couple went on their honeymoon, Marilyn left the honeymoon halfway to perform at an event organized for American soldiers in Korea.
How have you and Mrs. DiMaggio enjoyed your trip to Japan? Well, everything has been fine. We've enjoyed our trip. The only thing that I have to complain about is I haven't seen very much of Marilyn. She is making a trip to Korea, touring through the camps, and so maybe after that we'll be able to spend a little time together.
But the breaking point was that famous scene in Marilyn's film, The 7-Year Itch, where her skirt lifts up from the air rising from below. During the filming of this scene, in addition to hundreds of set workers, more than 1,000 men had come to watch Marilyn. When her skirt lifted, all the men tried to look between the actress's legs and cheered, and among those who came to watch was her husband, Joe DiMaggio. When Joe witnessed this scene filming where a crowd of men looked at his wife's legs and got excited, he had a fit of anger and jealousy. Joe occasionally used physical violence against his wife in this marriage. The marriage wasn't going to work, and the couple decided to divorce after 9 months. When Marilyn reached 30, she decided to unite her life with playwright Arthur Miller, who was 41 at the time. Arthur was an intellectual man. He had a unique charisma that appeared wise beneath his calm and cold nature. Throughout her life, Marilyn was especially drawn to intelligent men, particularly men with glasses.
It's a rather personal question, but is there anything in particular about Mr. Bowe that attracted you?
Have you seen him?
Yes.
But beyond all that, Marilyn had, for the first time in a long while, encountered a man who understood her. Arthur was one of the rare people who could see the wound in Marilyn. Marilyn finally felt understood by a man. She formed a deep connection with Arthur. The couple even thought about having children. But both of Marilyn's pregnancies ended in miscarriage. Although Arthur tried to understand Marilyn, his arrogance was evident. He saw himself as superior to Marilyn. One day, Marilyn found Arthur's diary and witnessed her husband's statements about her like, "I'm ashamed of her. Sometimes she embarrasses me." Also, Arthur wanted to turn Marilyn into a more traditional woman, like in her previous marriages. This marriage didn't work either, and the couple decided to separate after approximately 6 years together. Marilyn had ended a relationship that lasted this long for the first time, and where she thought she had found the right person. This divorce would intensify Marilyn's already existing depression much more. Illnesses began to appear. A cyst was found in her uterus, and she had sleep problems. She was taking painkillers and sleeping pills at night, but she was overdoing the doses of these medications. Those close to her were worried about this situation and took her to a psychiatric clinic. There, the authorities realized the seriousness of Marilyn's condition and placed her in an isolated ward. Marilyn stayed in this ward for exactly 3 weeks. She showed signs of self-harm. She was sending letters to her therapist, begging him to get her out of there. In the letter, she had written, "I feel like I'm in prison for a crime I didn't commit." The authorities said that no one had the authority to release Marilyn unless they were family. However, when Joe DiMaggio learned of his ex-wife's situation, he spoke harshly with the authorities and made threatening statements like, "If you don't release Marilyn, I'll bring this building down on your heads." The authorities finally had to release Marilyn. By the time she turned 36, Marilyn wasn't only taking her medications in high doses, she was also showing alcohol dependency. In August of 1962, she ended her own life as a result of intentionally taking an overdose of medications. Her life was briefly like this. We've built the necessary foundation for our research. Now, let's move on to the really important part: Marilyn's mental world. Why was she so successful? We all know it wasn't just because of her beauty. Although Marilyn had mesmerizing beauty, the Hollywood industry was full of women with such beauty. There were other factors that made Marilyn special. First of all, above everything else, she was an incredibly ambitious woman. And this ambition came from her childhood. In her childhood, Marilyn was a complete ghost girl. At school, she didn't attract attention from anyone and wasn't noticed. But one day, she experienced an event that would change her perspective on herself. She needed to get ready to go to school, and the white blouse the orphanage had given her was torn. She borrowed a sweater from a girl younger than her, and naturally, the sweater was small on Marilyn. Her breasts were visible, and as soon as Marilyn went to school in this sweater, she became the boys' favorite. She said, "They looked at it as if the sweater was a gold mine." The school's ghost girl had suddenly become the school's popular girl. Marilyn had become addicted to this attention she received from people. She saw that she could satisfy the hunger for attention that she could never get from her family. And she turned this hunger into ambition and channeled it into her career. Thanks to her ambition, while everyone was going home from the studio to rest, Marilyn was looking for ways to become a better actress. Some of the female character types in the roles she played were in what we call a childlike and innocent tone. And this tone was what men of that era secretly wanted. Whereas the female characters that stood out in cinema in the 1940s embodied what we call femme fatale characteristics. These women were mature, intelligent, and weren't manipulated by men. On the contrary, they manipulated men. Male cinema audiences were tired of these female character types who had taken their freedom into their own hands and weren't easy targets. And the characters Marilyn portrayed were exactly what men wanted. Both in her films and in real life, she always smiled. Her voice and expressions were childish. She showed her innocence and fragile side, and this triggered the savior-hero fantasy in men. To understand Marilyn's difference from the femme fatales of the 40s, just look at the voice tone of a female character from those years.
It's nice and quiet. The man there plays American music for $1. Sip bourbon and shut your eyes. It's like a little place on 56th Street.
Now look at Marilyn's voice tone.
No, just blind as a bat.
Me too.
Oh, really? Then why aren't you wearing glasses?
In the 1940s, the voices and expressions of female characters were often distant and composed. In contrast, Marilyn took on roles that seemed innocent and vulnerable, captivating audiences with her charm, naivete, and alluring presence. Once, she was taking a lesson with Michael Chekhov. Yes, the acting coach Michael Chekhov, who was the nephew of the legendary Russian writer Anton Chekhov. Michael paused for a moment during the rehearsal and said to Marilyn, "Were you thinking about romance while playing this scene?" When Marilyn answered no, Michael continued like this. "Throughout the scene, I received passionate vibrations from you. It was as if you were caught in the grip of desire. I now understand the problem you're having with the studios. Whatever you do, whatever you think, you're a woman who gives off passionate vibrations. The whole world has already responded to these vibrations. When you appear on the silver screen, the audience reaches satisfaction. The people you work with at the studio don't care how good an actress you are. They're only interested in your passionate side. To them, you're valuable not as an actress, but as a passionate evoker. Their only goal is to make money from your passion. I can now understand their way of thinking. You don't need to be a good actress. It's enough for you just to stand in front of the camera." Upon this, Marilyn responded, "I don't want to be like this." Michael asked, "Why?" And Marilyn said, "Because I want to be an artist, not a passionate, ardent commodity." Marilyn had built her career on being a passionate icon. But this label stuck to her so much that she realized it was now very difficult to shed this label. Her fame had a price. The industry Marilyn chose was a hell. Hollywood was full of wolves hungry to exploit young girls physically.
In this business, in the golden years, every casting director, every studio used to have a black book. You know what I mean? So every girl, I'm talking about kids that were breaking in like Marilyn Monroe, when they get started. All the casting directors, they would write in their black book who could be made. You see, the business has changed since then. Today it's the buck.
Right.
It used to be sex. Remember that.
Almost every producer and director she met tried to get her into bed. Marilyn had written this in her autobiography. "Hollywood is a place where they'll pay you $1,000 for a kiss, but 50 cents for your soul. I know this because by refusing the first offer time and again, I ended up settling for the 50 cents. In fact, she had even published an article about these predatory wolves in Hollywood. In this article, Marilyn described the immoral offers she received from producers throughout her career, whether they were married or single, and she called them wolves. These wolves generally had a cheap trick like this. "I'll make you a star. You have great potential." They generally approached Marilyn with this tactic. Marilyn would recognize these types of wolves as soon as she saw them. But according to her, there were some wolves who kept their mask on until the very end. Once, Marilyn had met with a screenwriter, and this screenwriter had approached her like a complete big brother. He was giving her books to read and telling her that she shouldn't fall into the trap of the wolves in Hollywood. Marilyn had trusted this man at first. The man was both quite old and married. But one day, the screenwriter invited Marilyn to his house. He said, "We'll eat something," but his intention was obvious. Marilyn also asked the man jokingly, "Your wife will be there too, right?" The man was offended. He never met with Marilyn again. Whether a girl survives among a pack of wolves depends entirely on her. If she tries to get something for nothing, she usually gives more than she bargained for. If she plays the game honestly, she can usually prevent unpleasant situations and even earn the respect of the wolves, Marilyn said. Despite being in the middle of the wolves' table, her bigger problem was being trapped in the dumb blonde roles that had stuck to her like a label.
Because you're reading that book upside down.
But I'm no such thing.
Not you, the book.
The roles she played weren't satisfying. Producers gave her either dumb blonde or gold digger women roles. Even the titles of the films she acted in were funny. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, How to Marry a Millionaire.
Because of a girl spending all of her time worrying about the money she doesn't have, how is she going to have any time for being in love?
Whereas Marilyn wanted to take on roles where she could reveal her dramatic side and be an artist. The reason Marilyn hated constantly playing dumb blonde roles was that people were gradually starting to think she was dumb too.
They told me you were stupid. You don't sound stupid to me.
I can be smart when it's important, but most men don't like it.
She loved reading books and writing poetry. She may have seemed extroverted to you with her energetic state in interviews. However, she was a complete introvert. She was someone who enjoyed spending time alone since childhood. Even when she achieved fame, she preferred to keep her social circle limited. She had a library containing hundreds of books. Among these books were classics, works by Dostoevsky, Plato, and Aristotle. In fact, at one point in Marilyn's career, she had said she wanted to portray the character Grushenka from the brothers Karamazov.
Blonde in the world, but a kind of a dumb girl because you're a beautiful blonde. And blondes and dumbness seem to go together. I think it all started with gentlemen prefer blondes.
You know, it's interesting that people associate if you happen to have blonde hair or if you're not out of shape in some way, you're absolutely dumb. I mean, you're considered dumb. I don't know why that is. I think it's a very limited view. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter what the person, what they look like, what color hair they have.
The truth is, Marilyn saw herself as intellectually inadequate. And in her autobiography, she frequently expressed that she felt an inferiority complex because of this issue. However, while listening to my two friends, something occurred to me. I realized that about 2/3 of the time, I had no idea what they were talking about. I couldn't hide this. I was very stupid. I knew nothing about painting, music, books, history, geography. I didn't even know anything about sports or politics. Marilyn wasn't technically even a high school graduate. She had to work in a factory at an early age to earn money. She didn't have the opportunity to dedicate time to her education in her youth. She didn't even have a family to give her basic education. But when she realized her cultural deficiency, instead of saying, "I'm like this," she made an effort to improve herself even though she was middle-aged. She even enrolled in a university and started attending classes. She wanted to show people, "I'm not just the superficiality of the characters I play." But there was a dark, complex, and depressive side that she didn't show anyone and was afraid to show. And she revealed this side through her poetry. Marilyn had a poet's instincts and reflexes, but her poems were uncontrolled. These were chaotic and short poems, as if written with sudden emotional outbursts. But in all these emotional outbursts, her dark side was revealed. "Oh, damn it. I wish I were dead. I definitely wish I didn't exist. I wish I could leave from here, from everywhere. But how would I do that?" Besides death references, we also saw performance anxiety in these poems. When I'm given new lines, I'm scared. Maybe I won't be able to learn them. Maybe I'll make mistakes. People will either think I'm not good, or they'll laugh, or they'll look down on me, or they'll think I can't act. Despite being the #1 star of the era, she had self-confidence problems. The women seemed harsh and critical. They weren't generally friendly and were cold. I was afraid the director wouldn't think I was good. I remembered the times when I couldn't do this damn job. Then I tried to build myself up with the belief that I was doing the right things. I even reminded myself that I had good and excellent moments, but the bad ones prevailed. I had no self-confidence that should have been felt. I was a depressive lunatic. She was sensitive not only to her own pain, but also to other people's pain, especially toward the lonely. I used to encounter many lonely young sailors. They seemed too young to be sad. They reminded me of thin trees, trees that suffered while growing. In some of her poems, she referred to her past, her childhood. Whenever I suddenly feel depressive, the source of this might be the past. I shouldn't feel guilty. Everyone's childhood is unique to them. We shouldn't be surprised that a person can never fully understand another. We can't know what pain a person has experienced in their past and how they carry this pain on their shoulders. That person needs to be given some leeway, even if this is unhealthy for that person. Especially this writing I'm about to show demonstrates that she was a complete ticking time bomb. It's been a year since the analysis ended. Help, help, help me. I feel like I'm approaching the end. All I want now is to die. Marilyn was receiving psychoanalysis treatment when she wrote this poem, and the analysis expression in this writing was probably a reference to the psychoanalysis that had been ongoing for a while. It's through these writings she wrote in her private diary that we could understand the depression in Marilyn. She had moments when she wanted to give up on life. She was afraid of being judged and humiliated by people. She couldn't overcome the family deficiency and abuse from her childhood. Let's say from the start, Marilyn Monroe was genetically unlucky, because mental illness was widespread in her family tree. Her mother was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. Her grandmother was also bipolar and lost her life in a mental hospital. Her great-grandfather ended his own life. In short, she had unlucky genetics in terms of psychiatric disorders. On top of all this, Marilyn didn't see family love in her childhood and was sexually assaulted. All of this worsened her mental health, which was already prone to problems. Even a photographer who worked with her had observed this situation. Marilyn could be happy and full of life one day, and the next day she could become sad, silent, even hostile. Marilyn would describe herself as Jekyll and Hyde united in the same body. Marilyn most likely suffered from bipolar disorder like her mother and grandmother. What she experienced in her childhood created post-traumatic stress disorder in her. She had a much darker inner world compared to how she appeared from the outside. For example, one of her favorite painters was Goya. She had Goya's book in her library, and she said this about this painter: "I understand Goya very well. We both have similar dreams." And if we look at Goya's paintings, we see they're not very uplifting. Marilyn was a woman hungry for attention, and she could satisfy this hunger for attention partially, though in an unhealthy way, through the roles she played. She was very absorbed in her career. In fact, we saw that her workaholism played a role in the end of her marriages to Joe and Arthur. Her hunger for attention came from childhood. I think my desire to attract attention as a child had something to do with the boredom I experienced on Sundays at church. When the organ played and everyone sang hymns, I would suddenly get the urge to take off all my clothes. I desperately wanted to stand up naked so that God and everyone else could see me. I had to clench my teeth and sit on my hands to keep myself from undressing. Sometimes I had to pray hard and beg God to prevent me from taking off my clothes. I mostly daydreamed about beauty. People passing by me would turn and look at me, and I imagined colors: red, gold, green, white. I imagined myself walking proudly in beautiful clothes, being admired by everyone and hearing words full of praise. I made up the praises in my head and repeated them out loud as if someone else was saying them. Daydreaming made my work easier. I would imagine escaping from the poor and unhappy homes I lived in and being a waitress in a fancy hotel, wearing a white waitress uniform, and that everyone entering the hall while I was serving would stop and look at me and admire me. Hollywood satisfied her need for fame and attention. but it didn't satisfy her need for family, which was actually what she truly needed, rather than attention. The concepts of family and belonging. At one point in her life, she wanted to have children and become a mother.
When are you planning to have some children? I'm not married yet, dear.
In fact, she had told a friend, "The happiest moments of my life were the moments when I was pregnant." She wanted to be a good parent. She wouldn't be indifferent like her own mother. She wouldn't leave and run away like her own father. "I'll raise my child without lies. No one will be able to lie to him about anything, and I'll answer all his questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll go look it up in an encyclopedia and research it." Having 2 miscarriages in her marriages with Arthur and never being able to have children shattered one of her biggest dreams, the dream of becoming a mother. We get almost all of our knowledge about the depression and dark side in Marilyn from her personal diary. But when we look at some of her interviews, we see problems both within herself and in people's behavior toward her. Now let's look at some interviews.
How do you feel about coming back to Hollywood? Is it a happy time for you, or is it a place of
Yes,
sad
it is.
memories?
It's a very happy time. I'm happy to be back
Glad
to my
that-
hometown.
Yes.
Well, you're a happy girl now.
Ah,
The female reporter is asking, somewhat mockingly, with an ironic expression, "Are you a happy girl now?" As if asking a little girl child. Notice how Marilyn's face immediately drops.
Well, you're a happy girl now.
ah.
Well, you're a happy girl now.
She's offended by this question. She's generally not happy, and she's getting irritated because the female reporter is taking a subtly condescending tone. In many interviews she attended, reporters treated her not like a mature person, but like a child. Let's look at this interview, for example. When this interview was taking place, Marilyn had founded her own production company and was staying as a guest at the home of her photographer Milton and Milton's wife. And the reporter was asking mocking questions.
Amy, tell me, does Marilyn know her way around the kitchen? Is she very much help around the house?
Well, yes, she is. She's sort of an ideal guest. She's not trouble to anyone, and she picks up after herself, and she's just fine. You don't even know she's around.
Does she make her own bed
Yes, she does, and she helps me with the baby to bathe him.
and cleans her own
Feed him.
room?
Yes, she does.
Uh-huh.
Marilyn was uncomfortable throughout this approximately 15-minute interview, especially when Milton's wife said she's harmless about Marilyn. Notice the drop in her face, even if just for a brief moment.
Trouble to anyone.
She was angry at not being taken seriously by the reporter. But above all, Marilyn couldn't hide her sadness in this interview. It was obvious she had a problem. Look at this interview that contains a similar situation.
Miss Monroe, could you tell us what kind of a wedding you're going to have?
Very quiet, I hope. Very quiet, I hope. But I'm not just generally happy. If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable.
Normally, she always tried to appear happy in front of the camera. She was hesitant to show her anxious side, but sometimes that mask would drop. One of the critical events that disrupted her psychology was her divorce from Arthur. Arthur was a truly special man for Marilyn. As we mentioned before, Arthur had sensed the depth and pain in Marilyn. Marilyn had also seen for the first time that she was understood by a man, and her relationship with Arthur held genuine hope. However, this relationship became destructive for both sides over time. Arthur said this about Marilyn: "Being exposed to her was like suffering. Either I would have to escape or I would be dragged into a disaster. Behind all her glamour was a darkness that left me bewildered." After Marilyn divorced Arthur, she developed a pessimistic view toward love. The threads were about to break. I think I've always been deeply afraid of being someone's wife, because if there's one thing I've learned from life, it's this: you can never truly love another person. One point in her tragedy was that just before she ended her life, she was starting to get exactly the roles she wanted. The title of the last film she acted in was The Misfits, and Marilyn shared the lead role with Clark Gable in this film. Interestingly, in her childhood, her mother had told Marilyn, "Your father looked like Clark Gable."
What makes you so sad? I think you're the saddest girl I ever met.
This man never said that. I'm usually told how happy I am.
Marilyn was a misfit, just like her last film. She didn't want to conform to Hollywood. She didn't want to conform to the orphanage. She couldn't get along with people.
Well, when I was put in the orphanage home, pulled me and I kept crying, screaming, I'm not an orphan. I called every woman I would see. I'd say, well, there's a mama. If I would see a man, I'd say, there's a daddy.
Marilyn Monroe's story reminds us that behind every smile, there can be hidden pain. Behind every success, there can be a struggle we don't see. If this story made you think, moved you, or taught you something new, please support this channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Which part of Marilyn's life affected you the most? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for being here.